Hey guys, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca. Thanks for tuning in to another car review for your growing family. Today on the program we're looking at the 2015 Prius C. This is Toyota's smallest and most affordable in their hybrid lineup of vehicles, and as you can see, it's considered a subcompact hatchback. And you know what? I actually really like hatchbacks for family vehicles. They're small, they're great on fuel economy, you can fit them into tight parking spaces. So for a secondary vehicle or for an urban family that really doesn't have much gear, they can be a fantastic option. That's why I gave the 2015 Honda Fit redesign a thumbs up a couple of months back on the program. Now this 2015 version of the Prius C has a couple of stylistic differences. However, for the most part, it's pretty much the same vehicle as it has been for a while now, since 2012. But there is a brand new, completely redesigned version of the Prius C coming out for 2016. So let's see how this one stacks up, see if it's maybe worth sticking it out for 2016, or if maybe this one's the ticket for you. Stick around, I'll tell you all about the Prius C coming up. So stepping into the Prius for the first time, the first thing I noticed is that I could actually fit, and I'm 6'2", but I've got about an inch of extra headroom up above me here, and that's with the seat lowered right down to the floor. However, with my seat adjusted for my long legs, there's really no room in the back seat at all for anyone beyond, let's say, an 8-year-old child or a kid in a front-facing booster seat. The other thing that I noticed as well in terms of seat comfort is that there's no lumbar support on these seats at all. So it means that you kind of feel like you're sitting in a bit of a hammock, to be honest with you. The seat really has this sort of dip to it, and they're not particularly comfortable, particularly for long hauls on the highway. And that's another thing that I noticed right away. I might be talking a little bit loudly here because even at slower speeds, but particularly at highway speeds, this car is very loud. There's a lot of extra road noise just from the wind blowing over it. The other thing that's really loud about this car is its transmission. It doesn't seem to want to change gears until quite late, which means that the engine revs very high, particularly at highway speed. It's just a little 1.5 liter engine, and it seems like it's working really hard to keep it going at highway speed. But the C in Prius C does stand for city. So it's in the city where the fuel economy on this car really shines. It actually has better city fuel economy than it does highway fuel economy. And according to Toyota, the company says that it should see an average of about 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers. And I actually am seeing that. I'm seeing exactly 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers here in front of me, and I did a reset the moment that I drove this car away at the beginning of the week. Now, speaking of the screen and the layout here in front of me, and it's not particularly intuitive. I have these buttons here in front of me on the steering wheel that will help guide me through the information system, through things like fuel economy numbers and general settings. But I can't really, I'm a fairly tech-savvy guy, and for example, it's stuck on miles per hour. I cannot for the life of me figure out how to change it to kilometers an hour. Everything else in the car, from the odometer to the liters per 100 kilometers rating, are all metric, but the speedometer is in miles per hour, and I don't know how to fix it. So it's not a very user-friendly interface, and I also find that in general, the layout on this vehicle kind of feels like it's just been slapped together, and it also feels a little bit cheap and tacky. The plastics down here, you can kind of hear that, hey? They're very sort of low-grade plastics, and it just doesn't feel like a $26,000 car. This whole subcompact market has gotten very competitive as of late because the Hyundais and Kias of the world have really upped their game in terms of fit and finish at a good price, and it means that these players like Honda and Toyota really need to up their game as well to stay competitive in the market, and I'm just not seeing it here in the Prius C. This car is actually based on the Toyota Yaris. and the same chassis and everything. It has a slightly different exterior look to it. In fact, that was one of the things that changed for 2015. A little bit of a facelift on this car on the outside, and I think that it looks quite nice from the outside. And I do also like the visibility out of the front window here. Good visibility all around, except for the rear window, especially when it's raining, because it has this tiny little rear windshield wiper that only cleans about this much of the window, and it means that on a rainy night you're not seeing much out the back. But I will say this, the LED headlights up front are fantastic, both the low beams and high beams. The night driving on this car, viewing from up front anyway, is fantastic. Okay, so let's go through some of our standardized tests now, because there were some good surprises here and some not so good surprises. First up, we'll go with the trunk test. And before I open up the trunk, take a look at that redesigned rear end that I was talking about. It's futuristic, it's sleek, and I think that it makes this car stand out compared to its competition. So I like that. And here's one of the good surprises that I'm just talking about. How much stuff the trunk can store. This is our standardized amount of gear. So we've got a couple bags of groceries, a backpack, a ball, a diaper bag, and a fold-up stroller, and it is tight. Like, you couldn't fit a hair's width more stuff in there, but hey, the door closes, and that's a real surprise to me for this tiny little car. Of course, what you can always do is fold down the second row of seating as well if you want to create a little bit more room for cargo. However, with this car, unfortunately, it's not a flush surface from trunk to that folded second row. It's actually quite a bit higher. Now, a reason why that might be is because the batteries for the hybrid system are actually stored under the seat on this vehicle. It means that it's going to have a more balanced, sporty feel, but it's affecting the cargo capacity a little bit for you there with that not flush second row. Looking at the rear-facing child seat that I put in place, yes, you can fit one in there. However, it does really hurt the legroom for the front passenger. The worst I've ever seen, in fact, in any of our testers, we have less than 6 inches of legroom to play with here. And that means that even the smallest of children are going to feel squeezed. Comparatively, that Honda Fit that I tested a couple months back actually had just over 11 inches of legroom. It meant that I could fit up there in a squeeze. It was tight, manageable. Here, yeah, if you've got a rear-facing child seat still, this is not the car for you. Now, let's look at our Softex faux leather material here in the higher end Prius C. It's meant to kind of have a convincing feel of leather, but according to Toyota, it's much greener. And I think that it looks pretty slick. But how does it do for cleanups? Here's some yogurt. Gonna smear some on there. Got a rag ready to go. How's it gonna do? Not bad, actually. Look at that. And as I say, in terms of faux leathers, this is one of the more convincing versions of it that I've seen. I just wish that there'd be a little bit more room for the front passenger with that rear-facing child seat. Okay, so I decided to do a little bit of math for you guys on this car compared to the Toyota Yaris, which, as I was mentioning earlier, shares a lot of the same DNA. Here's the thing though, you can get into a Yaris for about $16,000 in the 4-door option, and the Prius C starts at 21 grand and climbs up to 26,000 for this version that I'm in here today. The math doesn't really add up. You're actually spending more over the long term on the Prius C, even with those fuel savings, than you would on a Yaris. And to be honest with you, I think that the traditional gas hatchbacks are a lot funner to drive. They can be zippy and have this great kind of pizzazz and character to them. And I'm just not feeling that here today in this Prius C. Toyota is saying that the new hybrid Prius, the full size from them for 2016, is going to be the most exciting Prius to drive that they've ever made. And while they weren't willing to give me any information about the 2016 Prius C, I hope that that's the case with the smaller version of their hybrid vehicle as well. But if it were me and I were looking at the difference between the Yaris and the Prius C, personally, I would pocket the difference, know that you are going to spend just a little bit more at the pump, but that ultimately it's going to be a funner car to drive. But obviously there are people who want to drive a hybrid vehicle strictly based on the fact that they want to have less of a carbon footprint, and I get that. I totally respect that. And if you're okay driving around a vehicle that just doesn't have a lot of oomph to it and a lot of character, then have at her. And know, actually, the fact that this 2015 model is probably going to get blown out here in the next little while, and you might be able to find some pretty good deals. Or if you want to see what that new version looks like and what all that sort of quiet, hushed hype is about, then stick around and see what the 2016 has on offer. Next week, I'm going to be looking at a bit more of a conventional family vehicle, the new Mazda CX-3. You can always check me out on Twitter, see what I'm up to at Family Wheels. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel as well, and I'll be with you next week. Thanks for tuning in.